don't want to go so far as to say I am regretting my life choices. However, in June, I sat down and faced some cold, hard facts. I read less in the past 6 months than I had in any previous 6-month period since starting YouTube. A sexy little mix of depression and wedding planning were partially to blame, but being the gal that I am, I didn't want to look too closely at the actual causes of this decline in my reading. Avoidance is very cute, and it led me to the conclusion that if I wanted to get back on track to reach some of my ambitious and undisclosed reading goals for the year, I'd need to get creative. One solution: listening to an audiobook every single day in the month of July. Listening to a daily audiobook is actually something that I did very frequently when I was commuting into an office every day. I would listen to an audiobook on my way to work, and sometimes I would finish an entire audiobook before anyone else showed up to the office. I figured revisiting this habit might be a good way to get me out of Slump City and hopefully get me on cadence to smash some of my reading goals. I did it, with some interesting results. But before I get into those, I want to thank the sponsor of this video and let you know a little bit about Book of the Month. I'm excited to be working with Book of the Month again because they're the only book subscription service that I keep coming back to month after month. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover books they love. Their team vets hundreds of books each month and gives readers their choice from a curated selection of new and early release titles, so you can spend more time reading and less time researching. Book of the Month is risk-free. You can skip any month, anytime, and you won't be charged. Plus, they have the best price for new release hardcover fiction. You can get your first book for only $9.99 with code LEAVES. I'm so excited to get to both of these titles. Love on the Brain by Ellie Hazelwood is one that has been on my most anticipated list for this entire year. I'm so excited to have a hardcover version of it. I'm just really excited to dip my toes into this feminist romance. And Killers of a Certain Age is by a new to me author, but I know a lot of my friends really love Deanna Raybourne's other series, so I'm really excited to give this one a try. If you want to try Book of the Month out for yourself, go to bookofthemonth.com to see all of the selections for September and enter code LEAVES to get your first selection for $9.99. Thanks to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. Now let's talk about the 5 things I learned after reading 31 audiobooks in 31 days. Now, right off the bat, I figured out that despite my attempts at being a very well planned out gal, I had not accounted for the fact that I was going to have to make other videos while also taking on this challenge. Audiobooks I'm listening to are not books for specific videos, so I'm having to read 2 books a day, listen to an audiobook, and then physically read a book. And I'm not gonna lie, it is, hard. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I typically post 3 videos a week, and I typically plan my content months in advance. The idea for this video and this challenge actually came to me after I had already figured out my posting schedule for the month of July, and I had just launched a Patreon, and one of the perks on my Patreon is that you can see in advance what videos I'm planning on uploading for a given month. So I felt pretty locked into the videos that I had planned, and it just so happened that not many of those videos were opportunities for me to read audiobooks. I went back today and looked at my list of videos for the month of July, and a lot of the videos were very much based around indie romances and Kindle Unlimited, and if you know anything about indie romances, they don't typically have accompanying audiobooks. So I was forced to not only listen to an audiobook a day, but also read physical copies of books or ebooks to not only suit this challenge, but to also be able to upload the other videos that I had planned for the month of July. So the first lesson here is one that might not apply to anyone except for me, but if you take on a challenge, make room for it in your life and among your content. The next thing that I learned was that finding a rhythm is the key to success. I think I need to stop procrastinating so much and maybe plan things out a little bit better. I'm thinking maybe for the next week, I could potentially like set aside a certain amount of time in the day for the audiobook specifically. Right now, I have just been like sliding in a little bit of listening between the physical reading that I have to do. Whenever I get like sick of looking at a screen, I'm like, okay, I can plug in my audiobook. But maybe it would be easier if I just got all the audiobook listening done in the beginning of the day. I don't know. That's something I might experiment with next week and see how that goes. For the first 15 days of the challenge, I just picked up audiobooks whenever I could between physical books. It did definitely provide a nice reprieve when my eyes were getting tired from reading these physical books, but I realized mid-month that I would be getting done with those physical books that I needed to read for other videos pretty early on in the day, and then the audiobooks would be left to the wayside and I would have to finish them very late in the day. And I would have to scramble at like 10 p.m. to finish audiobooks, and sure, I love reading, but I also really love my sanity, and I really love my nightly routine of watching One Tree Hill at 10 p.m. So moving audiobook listening to the first reading related task to get knocked out at the beginning of the day was the key to success for me. And with a little bit of reflection, it kind of makes a lot of sense. I used to do this whenever I was doing that commuting. I would listen to my audiobooks at the very beginning of the day. I never really let them go unfinished until like 4 p.m., 5 p.m. when I was wanting to leave the office. I would finish them again, like partially through my commute, and then finish them at the very beginning of the day. And I think that that's just really a cadence that works for for me. It also felt really nice knowing that I had accomplished something like right at the beginning of my day when it came to reading. Like, dang, I already got one book taken care of. I can get endless amounts of books taken care of now. So the second lesson is, if you want to read more, set aside specific time and a time of day for it. Next comes some natural consequences, but the good kind. I read more in July than I had in any single month prior. I finished, I believe, either 51 or 52 books by the time the end of July rolled around. It wasn't something that I was shooting for. I was really hoping to just get those 31 audiobooks listened to and then read a minimum amount of books that would fulfill the requirements for those other videos that I had been planning for. It just so happens that one of the videos that I was planning for, I had to read 10 indie romances for it. None of those indie romances had audiobooks, so naturally it was going to be 31 audiobooks plus at least 10 books for that one video. And again, I post 3 videos in a given week or any given month, typically. What's interesting to me though is that even though I didn't have any grand ambitions, again, of going beyond those 31 audiobooks or going beyond the kind of requirements of those videos I had planned, I found myself actually wanting to read more the more that I read. I think a part of it was that a little part of me deep down was wondering how many books I could truly read in a given month. More than that, honestly, I was just fired up about reading again. Third lesson here, sometimes reading more books makes you want to read more books. I also think that by reading more and having this like ambitious challenge on my plate, I was also making reading more of a part of my everyday life. Now, clearly I have a book channel on the internet, like I am making books a part of my everyday life. When books are your main goal and the only thing that you're thinking about day after day, especially at this high volume, I was finding myself wanting to read more. It was like I would finish a book and then I was like, okay, what is the next one that I'm going to read? Honestly, the thought of watching TV didn't even really cross my mind. I know I talked earlier about how I wanted to watch One Tree Hill at 10 p.m. like I normally do, but I found myself watching TV less and less as the month went on because I was just even more excited to find books that I was excited about. Lesson number 4, if you read more books, you might just have more 5-star reads. Now, I've always considered that the reason that my average rating year after year for books is low is because I read at such a high volume. And it makes sense to me that the more that you read, the more discerning that you might become, and that as a result, you would maybe be rating books lower as well. You know, you're reading a high volume, you read more and more, you decide what you really, really like, and so, you know, if a book's missing that, you're more likely to rate it low. And this is always the refrain that I give people whenever they ask why I read so many books that I hate. Not that I read books that I think I'm going to hate, it's that I read so many books and therefore the likelihood I'll hate books is just a little bit higher. But in July, I learned something else is also true. If you're reading a lot, the chances you'll have more 5-star books in a given month is also higher. I'm sure that that's based on some sort of like statistical fact, but obviously as humans, we are not rational beings, we're not always statistical, and I think there is a hidden nugget in here, and that is, if you're reading a lot and you are looking for the good in every book that you read, you're hopefully going to be clinging to the things that bring you joy. I read a lot of duds in the month of July. If you go back and watch my July wrap-up, I talked about 16 of the 52 books that I read in the month of July, and almost all 16 of those books that I talked about were 2-star reads. So I think for me, the comparison game is really what saved so many books that I read in the month of July. I was reading so many duds, and even when I read duds, I look for the good things in the books. And I think what happened was that in the books where I was finding things that I liked, I was finding that they looked really, really good by comparison. And I think maybe that led to some inflation of the numbers. I feel like maybe I gave out more 5-star reads than I typically would because I was looking for the good in every book. But it is still a tactic that I would recommend. I feel like if you read more, the likelihood that you were going to find more 5-star books, I feel like it still stands. Lesson number 5, our final lesson. This challenge was not sustainable for me. And that's okay. Once the month of July finished, I was writing pretty high because I had accomplished my goal. It was also something that I was considering bringing into the month of August. Like, let me go ahead and read another 31 audiobooks in 31 days. However, COVID hit me, I think honestly on the first day of August, and I ended up, I think, not reading hardly anything for a good 2 weeks. By the end of the month of August though, I think I read about 22 books, so a pretty far departure from the amount of books that I'd read in the month of July, but I actually wasn't disappointed at the end of the month. In the past, as is definitely reflected in the way that I've talked about books in my reading wrap-ups, I've never really been satisfied with the number of books that I've read in a given month. Some months I would read really low numbers of books by my standards, some months I would read really high numbers of books by my standards, and it didn't really matter in what camp the books fell in, if it was a high number or low number, I was still always ultimately dissatisfied. Felt like the books on my shelves were taunting me and I would never be able to read all of the books that I want to read. I like the gamification of reading. I know some people will draw criticism there and say, well, it's your fault for wanting to read all of the books and maybe you shouldn't be reading at such a high volume, it doesn't matter anyway. After reading 52 books in a month, I had to sit with the fact for a second that this might be the only time that I accomplish something like this. I realized for myself that there is always another month, as long as I'm alive, hopefully, that I can take on a new goal. I can read more books, or I can choose to read fewer books. I know this sounds like a very astounding and not at all very obvious lesson, but it does all eventually average out for me. What matters at the end of the day is, am I having fun? Some months that might look like reading every possible book I can and trying to accomplish these really big and weighty goals. Some months I might just want to kick back and relax and read at a leisurely pace. But I think it's something that I actually had to grapple with, again, once I had finished reading these 52 books after I had listened to these 31 audiobooks in 31 days. I eventually came away with the fact that I don't need to do this month after month. I don't even need to accomplish this ever again in my lifetime. This is probably a no-brainer for some people, but I think I really needed this challenge to give me a more laid-back perspective. And if I do find myself procrastinating less after knowing what I'm capable of. Overall, this reading challenge has really changed the way that I think about books and conceptualize reading going forward. I don't think that the lessons I learned are necessarily ones that are going to apply to you if you decide to take on a challenge like this. And I know that there's an immense amount of privilege in being able to attempt this in the first place, but I do think that making the time to push yourself in any aspect of life, whether that's gamifying your reading or just like drinking more water in a given day, it can have a really profound effect on you. Or you can just get time to reflect, which is something that I'm finding I actually maybe do enjoy. Will I be attempting other more wildly ambitious challenges in the future? I don't know, check back in December. And let me know in the comments down below if you have ever attempted something like this, or if you would be willing to attempt something like this. I love y'all so much, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.